Well, joining me now is macro business chief economist Leith Van Onselen. Leith, thank you for joining me. Firstly, I just want to get your reaction as well to today's tariffs decision by Donald Trump. Is it really the vindication that Labor claims it is?
Look, it's certainly good news, and I guess the government can claim credit for not antagonising the Trump administration. It can probably also, gain a bit of credit for relaxing biosecurity rules around beef imports, which obviously would have pleased President Trump. But the reality is, Danica, that the lower baseline tariff of 10% that's been applied to Australia makes sense because we are one of the few countries that has a very large trade deficit with the United States. We import more than double the amount that we export to the United States. We also have a free trade agreement with the US, which has been in place for 20 years. So the trade relationship with the US is very heavily weighted in the Americans' favour, and I think that's why we got the lower 10% baseline tariff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was always going to be the default as announced by the Trump administration after the president's inauguration. Now, look, I want to ask you about this story. The Treasurer could introduce a new cash flow tax on Australia's largest companies. The recommendation was made by the Productivity Commission, of course, ahead of Labor's upcoming roundtable. Now, it recommends the corporate tax rate for businesses with revenue under $1 billion be slashed to 20%, while around 500 companies, so major banks, miners and supermarkets, would miss out on a cut. Leith, is this a good move, do you think?
Look, I'm a little bit lukewarm on the idea. The Productivity Commission claims that the move is going to boost private investment, which is at recessionary levels, and it's part of the reason why Australia's productivity absolutely stinks. But personally, I think there's better ways to boost investment and cheaper as well. So I think first, the federal government should offer time-limited tax breaks for startup businesses. And the reason why startups is that they're more likely to employ staff than existing businesses, which already have the staff they need. They're more likely to innovate because they're typically looking to introduce new products and services or provide older ones in new ways. So they're very innovative. And also there's way fewer startup businesses than there are existing businesses. So it'd be very cheap. And of course, because it'd be time limited to startups and startups don't stay startups forever, it's also a way of, containing the costs. And I think the government also needs to provide direct tax breaks for new investments only. So this would boost business investment directly by encouraging said business investment. And that's better than blanket corporate tax cuts because the blanket tax cuts for everyone, or at least for businesses below 1 billion, basically rewards existing businesses for past investment, not new investment. And the government needs to stimulate new investment and it needs to do it the lowest cost way.
Yeah, well, as I said, we've got this productivity roundtable coming up. Let's see what sort of taxes are on the table. And I'm sure that the Treasurer already knows what could be coming up, so stay tuned. Now, look, let's talk immigration, Leith. We've just witnessed the highest net arrival number on record in May. And now there's more proof that high immigration is harming productivity. Now, obviously, productivity is a disaster in this country. But what's the link with Labor's Big Australia policy?
Yeah, so I just mentioned that business investment's at recessionary levels, but the flip side of that is the main reason that Australia's productivity has collapsed is that we've grown the population aggressively, 8.7 million this century, through immigration, at the same time as we have not grown business investment, infrastructure, housing anywhere near to keep up. And as a result, the capital to labour ratio has fallen significantly. And what that's led to is so-called capital shelling. So basically, we've got less tools, less equipment per worker, and that means we've got less productivity growth. And we've also driven up housing congestion costs through, just traffic congestion, those sorts of things, and they're harmful for productivity. So with Australia's population projected to grow by 13.5 million people in the next 40 years officially, Danica, that's another Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. It basically means that Australia's population productivity is going to stink unless we can keep up with business investment, with infrastructure and housing, which seems very unlikely. We basically need to replicate another Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane in 40 years. So one of the ways to actually improve productivity is to slow the population growth so that business, housing, infrastructure investment can keep up.
Yeah, well, while we keep keeping the door open, I mean, we're just not heading in a good direction, but it seems to be Labor's big policy. Leith, before we let you go, inflation, of course, has fallen based on the new results this week. Can we expect a rate cut, do you think, when the board meets next?
Oh, absolutely. Lock it in. So the RBA is waiting on two key pieces of data, and that was basically the Q2 CPI, which we got this week, and the June labour force, which we got a few weeks back. Both of those were very benign for inflation. So I think a rate cut is virtually guaranteed.
All right. Well, I'm sure mortgage holders will be very pleased with that. Leith Van Onsen, good to see you. Thanks very much for joining me on the show this evening. Well, coming up...